all yours, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Township of Springfield Planning Board to order for March 1st, 2021. Adequate notice has been given within accordance of the Sunshine Laws. Notice was published on January 8th, 2021 in the Star Ledger, which is the official newspaper of the Township of Springfield, and posted on the Annex Building on January 11th, 2021. Let's all do a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation,
under
God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Law, can we please have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Mayor Chris Weber.
Here.
Committeeman Rich Huber. Not here yet. Mr. David Barnett.
Here.
Mr. Andrew Schwartz.
Present.
Mr. Aaron Laufer.
Here.
Mr. Brian Brendel is absent. Ms. Marissa Ruggiero.
Here.
Vice Chair Kessel. Chairman Tiger.
Here.
Sorry, I'm going out of order. Mr. Thomas Lopes.
Here.
And Mr. Scott Wishna.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We skipped February because we decided to have 20-something inches of snow, which was great. Can we have a motion? We had January meeting minutes that were out there. I know it was on the Google Drive. Can I have a motion for the January 2021 meeting minutes?
Chairman Tiger, make a motion for the approval of the January 2021 minutes.
Second.
Ms. Kessel seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one should be abstaining because everyone was there. Anyone abstain? Perfect. Motion passes. Okay, on that same January meeting, we had an application which was application 1-2021S. This was Summit Hill Springfield LLC. They have a preliminary site plan and for 4 variances. I know that everyone had a chance to review the resolution on the Google Drive. Anyone with any questions or concerns?
Nope.
Seeing none, I see Mr. Schwartz waiting to make a motion to approve.
No, that's not true.
Oh, that's not true. Okay, Mr. Ruggiero.
So moved.
Second.
Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Ruggiero.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Mr. Laufer.
Yes.
Mr. Lopes.
Yes.
Mr. Wishna.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel.
Yes.
And Chair Tiger.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Perfect timing. I see Mr. Huber has joined the meeting. Mr. Huber, can you hear us? Connecting to audio. Give him a second. See, Mr. Huber, you're on mute. Okay, I'm going to take that as a sign that he's with us. Next thing, every other month or so, we do an environmental update. Mr. Girio, would you like to give us a brief overview of environmental?
Sure. It was a pretty long meeting, so I don't want to belabor everything that we discussed, but I think really what's pertinent to us here on the planning board is the discussion of the flood mitigation plan that we are submitting. So we need to earn 20 points to show the mitigation efforts that we are doing in Springfield over the past year. So the recommendation was to form a flood mitigation committee and to have representatives from the Office of Emergency Management, Planning Board, municipal officials, zoning officer, engineering, DPW, and any other members that we see deemed important enough to involve. Apparently there was a meeting such as this in 2015. So I guess I'm tasked to kind of gather the people together to get this started. So just wanted to kind of update on that. So that's really, I think, the most important thing that we discussed at the meeting. But some of the other things we did, I did want to also, we mentioned the passing of Dave Mitchell. I don't know if people here were familiar with him, but he was a member of the Environmental Commission. So we're looking to do a memorial for him in some way. Possibly there's an herb garden that is being created at the Cannibal House. So there's discussion about possibly naming it after him, although we haven't fully put any efforts into that plan yet, but that's something that we're looking to do. I think that's right. Thank you.
That's good. So perfect. So Mr. Disco, I guess you'll follow up with Mr. Girio to kind of talk a little bit about what we need to do to prepare for it. And if we need a little subcommittee to kind of get together, and then we can go from there between now and our April meeting to come up with a plan of attack.
That's good.
Mr. Disco's shaking his head. He loves doing all this stuff. Perfect. Any questions from the board on Mr. Girio?
I just have one. It was the old flood mitigation committee. There was one. Are they?
There was, yes. And
Done?
and there may
Start a
be one, there was a question of whether it was still active or not, but if it is, then we need to be part of it because the commission's not involved with it if it's still active right now.
Okay. I will tell you that I was
recently.
No,
I think,
go ahead.
no, I think Dave Mitchell was the contact. So, and so I think we lost that knowledge with him. So,
I had been in it a few years ago, and I had stopped. It really wasn't going anywhere when I was part of it, and it just kind of it really didn't have any traction in any manner at all. So if a new one is starting, that'd be great.
We'll coordinate with Marissa and Mr. Disco to determine that.
And
What we need to do.
actually, Mayor Weber, I can give you some more context there as well. That committee was formed when Rich Huber and I took office years ago, and there was a mission for it. So it may have strayed, and maybe it's not relevant anymore, but certainly happy to chat.
I think kind of what happened was I think you guys, you had a path, and I think what happened was after you had left, they just kept hitting roadblock after roadblock, and I don't think they had any means of anything except for getting together all the time and talking. I wasn't involved really at the time except for being on that committee.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like anytime they spoke with anybody, it was, they were just traveling from town to town or, meeting to meeting and relaying info. But
Actually, a lot of that had to do with the mayors and Mr. Chairman. I don't want to go too more
I got you.
agenda, but a lot of that had to do with the mayor's flood committee, which was getting a lot of momentum on flood mitigation along the entire Rahway River. That then hit a problem in the last presidential administration. So now that has changed, we might be able to get back to actually.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Thank you, Marissa, for being an outstanding environmental commission rep.
You're very welcome.
Moving on to the next thing, we have from time to time our ordinance subcommittee meets, reviews things that we're getting lots of zoning board applications for. We're getting some planning board applications for, and I believe the subcommittee met. And Mr. Disco, if you would mind kind of talking us through some of the proposed fence ordinances, changes, accessory structures, generators, and so forth. So that way we can move it along and send to the governing body for their March 9th meeting to potentially review and take any action for an ordinance.
Okay, thank you. There were four essentially issues that we discussed. The first came from staff, and it's very simple. There's a conflict between the zoning map and the written or codified land use regulations for the I-20's general industrial zone, which is the front yard. So that conflict we're just trying to rectify. And the map reads 25 feet and the codification reads 12 feet. The zoning officer and I have gone back as detailed as we can to identify where that 12-foot got in there. And nobody can seem to find where it was in any official capacity put in there. So could have just been an error when somebody from the independent codification people, the E-code, did it, or it may have been something that slipped in from somebody on Springfield's end. So seems very simple. We just want to bring those into agreement. 25-foot front yard for the I-20 zone. Imagine there's going to be discussion on that.
Now, can anyone on the board have any questions with that one? Seeing none, we'll move Mr. Disco to the second one.
We had two that emanated from the Board of Adjustment Chair, Jody Cohen. One was for residential generators. There was a sense that they wanted to tweak the ordinance on that. We had done a table which showed all of the residential generators over the last couple of years. The feeling or the suggestion was, could we reduce the side yard setback on that? When we went through the data, reducing the current side yard setback of 10 feet to something less, to 8 or 7 was the suggestion, only would have reduced the number of applications going to the Board of Adjustment by 1. We didn't feel that that was worthy of a change because generators and AC equipment, which are both 10 feet in the side yard, do generate some noise. And when you have an adjacent residential property next to that, there could be some negative impact. What we did though, and the suggestion is, once you get beyond the rear of the house and into what would some people call the rear yard, we could reduce that setback from the 10 foot to what other accessory structures have, which is 5 foot. It would in effect incentivize people, if the distance is critical and they can't attain the 10, rather than seek the variance from the board, where it would be the worst for a neighbor, to get it behind the house and let it be closer to the property line. It's similar to what other municipalities have, and it's an attempt to reduce the number of residential generators that are going to come before the board. They had 3 last year. I think they had 11 over 12 years. Generators really never existed residential until Sandy and Irene in 2011 and 2012. They did have 3 next year. We've seen an uptick in the number of people seeking generators as the prices come down and as power failures seem to be more imminent. So that's the recommendation. We discussed it with the ordinance subcommittee. We don't feel there's any downsize or negative to having a reduced rear yard setback for the residential generator, essentially behind the rear of the house.
Mr. Disco, did the zoning official, Bob Herbert, have any comments, concerns? Was he good with this?
Yeah, we discussed it with him, and sometimes it helps to run through the data. Again, there seemed to be a sense that the side yard setbacks were probably only going to be, from 10 to 9 to 8. It turns out that there's so many of them that were at 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot. We didn't want to legislate that or permit that. They got to go to the board for a 2 or 3 foot offset on the side of the residential structure, so be it.
Okay. Any members of the board have any questions? Keenan, any concerns from a planning standpoint?
No, nothing to add from my end.
Okay, seeing none, Mr. Disco, can you go on to the next one?
Yeah, as a piggyback to that, and this is 3515-1H now, where with residential generators was in G. We did have, and we discussed this with Bruce Bergen, the Board of Adjustment attorney, that we are going to allow for some de minimis lot coverage exemptions for AC generators, dish antennas, pool equipment replacements, so that if somebody's over on lot coverage and they're proposing a 2x3 AC unit, we're not going to send them to the Board of Adjustment for a lot coverage variance for that. So again, that's just a practical thing. We were doing that discretionary, and we're just trying to make it a legitimate thing. And again, don't see any down issue with this, as it's rather de minimis lot coverage percentage increase, which doesn't even show up to a 0.1% typically.
And Mr. Hughes, any concerns from a planning standpoint? It sounds very reasonable.
It does. I think that's reasonable. No concerns.
Any members of the board with any questions for Mr. Disco on this one? Nope. Okay, the final one, Mr. Disco.
We've got the fence on corner fencing for the Board of Adjustment is probably, and Jen could attest to this, probably their most frequent application. And they routinely are getting corner lot fence applications where residents on the secondary front yard, I hope everybody understands that term, what many people consider the side of the house, but it is also a front yard, and they're seeking to install fencing right up to the property line. The Board of Adjustment continually gets 6-foot-high solid fence requests, and what they've been, I'll use the term negotiating with residents and applicants, is to go to 4-foot solid with then a foot above that of a lattice, so you get a 5-foot fence. Unfortunately, one of the problems is almost exclusively these fences are coming in as a white vinyl. They're very stark. They don't blend in well. If you drive down a street and you see a solid fence right up on the property line, it's somewhat problematic, both from a visual standpoint and then either sight triangle or for safety reasons, somebody trying to back out of a driveway and their neighbor has a fence right up on the right-of-way line. So we did a table for this, and it was much more on the front yard fencing. And what we suggested some ordinance changes, which is if a residential structure already violates the front yard. So let's say it has a 30-foot front yard requirement setback. And let's say the house is already at 19 or 20 feet. If somebody wanted to put a fence at 25 feet back, they would have to go before the board and get a variance for that. And that's happened many times. And so one aspect of it is if the residential structure is already non-conforming in the setback, that the fence should be able to match that without them going to the Board of Adjustment. There was examples of this on Washington Avenue and elsewhere. Again, you're not exacerbating an encroachment because the building with the massing and 2 stories dwarfs any fence which matches that in terms of the location. Not forward of the house, but only matching it. Or it could be behind the house or the face of the house, but still within the required setback, and that would still require a variance. The board was routinely, had no reason not to approve them, so that's one aspect of this ordinance. The second is the more common one where on the non-front entrance side on a corner lot where you've got the 2 front yards, in an attempt to remedy the number of applications coming to the board and also to craft it in a way which makes a little bit more sense from aesthetics and safety. So the proposal was for a 4-foot open fence. And I'll remind the board that chain link fences are prohibited in Springfield and have been for about 7 or 8 years. I conferred with Sam Mardini on that, and that was strictly from an aesthetic point of view. So in residential zones currently, chain link fences are not permitted. So for other open fences 4 foot high, you could continue to be at the right-of-way line because you would have the visual ability to see through them. They're 4 foot, they're not tall, the safety aspect of it and the visual goes much down. But as many residents wish or desire, the taller solid fences, which routinely they ask for at the right-of-way line, we've suggested that they be set back 10 feet from that right-of-way line, the secondary front yard, if you will. And the reason we chose that distance is 2 reasons. The site triangle standards that we have are a triangle that's 20 feet by a distance depending upon the hierarchy of the road. So when you're set back 10 feet from the right-of-way, it very much coincides with the 20-foot setback from the curb line. The typical residential road is 30 foot wide of pavement in a 50-foot wide right-of-way, meaning the town owns 10 feet beyond the curb on each side. Mm-hmm. The secondary aspect of it is if you had a car and you were trying to get out of a driveway, the 20-foot allows you to see in all directions without having to enter the roadway to get past a fence of a neighbor or of your own property that's right on the right-of-way line. So there was some thought process behind it, and that's what we recommended. In fact, the Board of Adjustment at their last meeting had a application like this, and actually, whereas in the past they would have approved the 5-foot solid fence, they actually moved and required it to be set back an additional 10 feet from the right-of-way. So as a practical matter, the first application that they had, even though it wasn't official, but some of the board members, including the chair, were aware of this proposed ordinance, they actually went along with the spirit of it and the intent of it. So that was very long-winded. I hope everybody understands the corner lot problem. And I did submit a ton of pictures, I think, that showed fencing where, especially these vinyl fences are right on the right-of-way, especially on corner lots, and there's a visual issue. And then when you have an open or more setback fence, that issue tends to be lessened or negated in some way.
So, Mr. Disco, Mr. Herbert, the zoning officer, agreed with these changes. I know
Yes.
not Mrs. Cohen, I know the zoning board chair, not that she has a vote on this, but she also supported these changes that would make the board, flow through with the applications that required the right attention. Am I correct?
That's correct. And again, they still have the mechanism to go through the variance process. But what this does hopefully is incentivize people, if they want these taller solid fences, they step it back 10 feet on their own and don't have to require the variance. Or they incentivize to go to the open fence. A lot of the people who come before the board, it's a safety issue. Small children or pets. Certainly a small child isn't going to run or leap over a 4-foot high fence, even if it's open in some way. So you achieve what their goal is. If you want the privacy, which is totally to be, not have anybody peer through, we think it's legitimate to ask for the additional setback. There's no magic as to it. The 10-foot seems to work in that it jives with the site triangle ordinance and also the practicality of a vehicle length and the safety of it.
Perfect. Mr. Hughes, any questions or concerns before the board takes this up?
No, I mean, I was just looking at the language that was drafted in the ordinance, and I think it's it's basically consistent with what Mike described, and I think it makes sense to allow the 4-foot open. And it looks like it's defined. One of the questions I was gonna ask is how do you define open, but he's got it at least 51% open, which I think makes sense. And then anything taller than that, you have to meet the setback. So I think sounds like we're achieving the goals in terms of aesthetics and the safety concerns Mike pointed out.
I agree. Anyone from the board have any questions, concerns? I think this it gives us a good balance between, making sure that we're protecting the consistency of the neighborhood and, being thoughtful for our residents as well.
The standard picket fence would be 50% open, right?
It could be. It depends really what the openings or the slats are versus the actual solid portion of it.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So if there are no other concerns, what I'm just going to ask the board I'm going to entertain a motion. Glenn, I think this is just for you to send, or Jen to send a note to the governing body saying that the planning board finds these 4 things consistent with the master plan and that they can look at adopting it. Or which way we do with this?
Yeah, you reviewed it pursuant to the requirements. You find it consistent and you recommend that they move ahead in all due speed. Jen, you can just do that. You've done it. You've got a form 1 right in the file. You can probably just do one for all 4, because I don't think we're making any recommendations from what I heard. We're not making any changes at all. Right, Michael? You're in complete agreement with everything that they've done, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think Jen can just do it and just send it as one piece of correspondence.
Perfect. So I'm going to hold off on, I guess go ahead and do that. We have another one, but it came through separately, so we'll do that. So can I have a motion to authorize our board secretary to send a note to our township administrator and clerk, letting them know that these four changes to the zoning ordinance are consistent with the master plan.
So moved, Barnett.
Second.
Let's do I'll do a roll call just to make sure that we're all on board. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Committeeman Huber,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer,
Yes.
Ms. Ruggiero,
Yes.
Mr. Lopes,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes. Okay. For the record, Mr. Brendel joined a few minutes ago, maybe 10 minutes ago. I don't know if it was during the time. So now anything further business, he would be authorized to vote going forward. Next thing is we received notice from the clerk regarding there's some township committee ordinance changes. It's basically ordinance 2021-3, a temporary outdoor signs to allow, different signs and seating. Mike, do you want to quickly give us an overview of the quick changes so we can determine whether it's consistent?
Yeah, it didn't come from staff. It's really from the council level and manager level. Essentially, during COVID, what they're trying to do is allow for temporary outdoor signs, particularly for restaurants and other venues that are doing outdoor stuff and need that little extra ability to stay afloat. I don't think it's not long-term, it's not permanent, and it could certainly be reauthorized depending on the time limits of it. Very just common sense stuff, trying to help the businesses inside.
Yep, and it was on the Google Drive. I don't know if there's any questions or concerns. They put this into play about 6 months ago, and now they're just redoing it. There was a time limit on it.
Yeah, just like they were proactive. They formed a committee for outdoor dining that wasn't normally permitted, and we allowed that during the executive actions of the governor and the pandemic. This is the same type of thing. Other things expire, I think, April 1st or March 31st. And the town attorney basically drafted the language of this, and again, very routine, common sense. It's not long term. It's just to help out people.
Mr. Hughes, do you any concerns?
No concerns. I mean, the towns that didn't have temporary signage provisions already in their ordinances, obviously with COVID, have been forced to kind of look at making these tweaks. So it's reasonable and makes sense from my perspective.
Perfect. All right, any members of the board? I'm just going to open it up. Seeing everyone shake their heads. So
No,
with
this one.
Oh, you have one? Okay, go ahead, Mr.
No, I said this is a good ordinance. We need to.
Oh, it's a good ordinance. Okay.
I agree with this.
So it would be the same thing. I'm going to ask the board to authorize the board secretary to set.
So moved, Barnett.
Second.
Okay, I made the motions. Go ahead. Roll call, Jen.
Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ruggiero,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
Committeeman Huber,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer,
Yes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
Chairman Tiger.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to have our first and last application. Let me just see before if there's any members of the public that had any questions. There was none. Seeing that. Okay. Next is application 2021 S Hobby Lobby, 295 Route 22 East, Block 4001, Lot 3. This is for preliminary and final site plans for bulk variances. From what I understand, it's outdoor storage, but I'm sure we're going to hear from Mr. Cohen a little bit about the application and what the use, why Hobby Lobby needs something like this. So, Apu, can we promote Mr. Cohen and any of his esteemed professionals?
Mr. Cohen, I brought yourself and Corey Chase forward. Is there anybody else that I need to bring forward?
We don't see you, Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Chase, good evening. I'm not sure if you know of anybody else who needs to join on your behalf.
I would expect David Halls would be the site engineer. Is he in the waiting room?
Yep, we got him.
Okay, now you see me?
Yes, it's like hear no evil.
Okay.
Neither
Can
still
you
no
hear
evil.
me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I apologize for that. I saw David Halls, he's on, okay. I have Mr. Chase. Is he here, Mr. Chase?
Yes, he's there.
I'm here.
Okay. And who's APU? I don't know. We're also supposed to have Matthew Abnett. That's the only other person.
I'm not seeing that name. I do see one other.
APU, maybe that's him?
No, Apu is our administrator, our head of IT, as we now nicknamed him.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep going, and if necessary, we'll figure something out. Okay.
Perfect. Mr. Cohen, welcome to Springfield Ford. If you can give us an overview of the applicant and then talk about which ones are going to be your witnesses.
Yes.
Chairman
thank you.
Tiger, can I interrupt for one moment, please?
Yes.
The one other member of the public that just raised their hand. May I bring them forward because they may
Oh,
log in with-
absolutely. Absolutely. We good, Apu?
I believe so.
Okay.
Okay. I also see Carol Sorensen. She's from Hobby Lobby.
Yes, and we've got Matt in here with us.
Yes.
Oh, and she's got Matt. She has the other person that's involved. But Carol, we don't see you. Can you somehow click into this?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least we have voice.
We'll figure it out. Hang on a second. Okay.
Yeah, but for the public, Mr. Cohen, I'd like to.
There's Matt. Here's me.
Okay,
good.
very good.
Together.
Hello, people.
Perfect.
Okay, you tell me when you're ready for me.
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Gary Cohn, and I represent the applicant Hobby Lobby. Basically, this application really began over a year ago, but it was during the time that COVID had just begun, and we were not so sure we wanted to do this via Zoom. But I suppose if we were waiting to have live meetings, we'd probably be another year. So, and I think everybody's comfortable now with knowing how this works. So this is an application. Hobby Lobby is a tenant in in property located at 295 Route 22 East. It's a highway commercial zone. It is Lot 3, Block 4001. There's probably a few buildings on the site, but our building, we share it with Panera Bread. And what we are seeking to do is to place the 3 storage containers on the property for the tenant Hobby Lobby to use. The building is owned by Springfield Associates LLC, and they are familiar with the application, had no objection, and I believe they very much are in favor of Hobby Lobby getting an approval. The particular containers, and we've submitted the plans and we've submitted the application, and these containers are placed in an area, or to be placed in an area, that have the least visual impact to the public and do not interfere, I should say, with any of the site operations. We believe that the 3 containers are probably the best zoning alternative that could be done here, in that they don't affect really anything at the site. It doesn't affect the aisles. It doesn't affect traffic flow. It only impacts 10 parking spaces. We have submitted a parking study. There was a prior parking study that was done by Panera, which said that there appears to be plenty of parking at the site. So we're not impacting that. We're not impacting, the setbacks in the various areas where the property, the buildings are already, I believe, somewhat over in terms of coverage, but this doesn't impact the coverage at all. The variances that are involved here are the fact that these are accessory structures. It involves outdoor storage. There is some reduction in the parking. in 10 spaces of 10 spaces. And it doesn't affect much of lot coverage, but lot coverage is already at the site somewhat, non-conforming at this point in time. So that's basically our the basic part of our application. I have with me David Halls, who's an engineer and planner. Mr. Halls is the person who actually signed the site plan. I also have Corey Chase, who is the traffic engineer, and I have Matthew Abnett, who works for Hobby Lobby as a professional. He's familiar with the operations. He's been a manager for many years. He's familiar with the Springfield site. And he also, for Hobby Lobby, works directly with their real estate. I would just say that you'll hear our people testify, but this is really very important to Hobby Lobby. Mr. Abnett will explain that at the times we have to buy certain products, we just need someplace to store them. And this is really
Mr. Cohen, I'm gonna interrupt. Why don't we, I'd like to hear from Hobby Lobby why they need it, not essentially from you. That's the main question, is why they need it, and then we can decide whether we need the engineer and traffic study and so forth from board standpoint.
Yes, you would like to hear from Mr. Abnett first?
Yeah, Hobby Lobby. I want to understand why they need to put something in outdoor storage, which is something we typically try to avoid having. So if we can swear him in, if we could, Mr. Keynes, would you mind swearing him in?
Yes, sir. He's not on my screen, but sir, would you please raise your right hand?
All right.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, the proceedings before the board tonight, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Matthew, how do you spell your last name, since I know how to spell Matthew?
A, B as in boy, N as in Nancy, E-T.
Okay, and what's your position with Hobby Lobby, Matt?
I'm a real estate representative.
Okay. I don't think we have to qualify him for anything, Mr. Chairman, so.
Nope.
Let's
go
and have at it.
Mr. Cohen, if you can focus on why they need it, why it's so important, peak times and so forth. That's what I think the board would like.
I was going to go through some introductory things with him, but if you want me to get right to the point with him, I will.
Right
to the point.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Abnett, let me just ask you this. You're familiar with the site in Springfield, correct?
Yes, I did the original deal with the landlord.
Okay, and you're familiar with the operations in that site, correct?
Yes.
And you're requesting that 3 containers be placed at the westerly side of this building. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you explain why Hobby Lobby needs these 3, excuse me, why Hobby Lobby needs these 3 containers, what they will be used for, what their purpose is?
Sure. Sure. So our standard size store is about 55,000 square feet. This store is 42,000 square feet. So as we've expanded into the Northeast and other markets and stuff like Springfield, the opportunity to find stores the size that we need have been limited. So we've adjusted down to take smaller spaces. In so doing, we are limited in the amount of square footage we have for sales floor, but also for the back room and for storage areas. So this store has a lot less percentage of back room. We don't store a ton of stuff in the back room, but because of the volume and what we have to keep back there to feed the store out front leaves us with really no opportunity to put bulk items into the back storage area of the warehouse space. We are a seasonal company, obviously. Our biggest season is Christmas. To have the merchandise in the stores, excuse me, and be selling it to customers over the summer so that they can be making the products and preparing things to sell in the fall, we have to ship things to the stores much earlier. So we start shipping Christmas trees and bulk items of Christmas, which are wreaths, Christmas lights, garlands, and then of course, artificial Christmas trees, to the stores in usually March and April. In March and April, we don't have room on the sales floor for them because we have all our spring goods still. And because this store is so small, we don't have room to store them in the back room. So in most stores where we have, or most locations where we have a limited space, we rent or buy storage containers out back, and we put them right into those storage containers until we need them and are ready to start putting them onto the sales floor, which usually happens in June-ish, June, July. And then depending on the store size, and this being on the very low end of store sizes, we will also then bring them in from those containers throughout the season to have them in the store to sell, but we can't bring them all in at once. And so that's really the main reason, is for bulk items.
Okay.
There's no way to get any other additional space from the landlord, sharing anything from Five Below. I don't know, but you know, this is a big threshold for us.
Yes, there is not any other way that we've identified that we can be secure and you know, the other spaces are occupied. It's a limited size shopping center. And so, and needing to have it and accessible as needed right there at the store is very key to our operations. If we had to go off site and find it and bring it back, that would be just really difficult for the store to do on a daily basis if we needed to access trees or any bulk items to restock or to sell to a customer.
Go ahead, Mr. Cohen.
I was going to ask you, so what would be the access to these containers in terms of your operations? How would it work?
Yeah, so the containers would be, there's standard kind of shipping type containers that would sit on the ground. So they have the doors just kind of open up left and right in the middle there. And then the way they are set up would be set up on that side there in that back corner. There are some doors. There's a fire exit door there that we can unlock. We can go out to the sidewalk. We can walk around to the front of those containers, open them up. Usually we're accessing them maybe one time during the day if it's during the busy season. Most of the time we won't be accessing them until later in the year, mid-season, and then bring that stuff in for the day. So that's not happening at the front. That's not happening, you know, just there's access around the back there to pull that into the store. And then we just can keep a small area in the limited stock room that we have.
If you were not to have these containers, how would Hobby Lobby function?
Well, we're at a critical point right now. You know, we were at a critical point when we did the deal, being 42,000 square feet. That is 40,000 is our absolute minimum that we can figure out how to operate in. Sales volume, the city of Springfield has been good to us, and sales volume is increasing. So that means we have to have more product that's coming into the stores, and not having a place to put it is really making it difficult in terms of being able to just function and operate in the back room and in, to pull all that merchandise into the sales area.
So in a sense of the fact that the sales have improved, that has brought about the need for this. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I don't know, you have any other questions, members?
Yeah, so I'm going to open it up to the board for some questions. From an engineering standpoint, and we could get our engineer and so forth. I don't think it's an engineering issue. It's whether is it truly needed, and that's what I think the board, will have some questions. So I'm gonna let me get my agenda so I can go in order. Mayor Weber,
Not right now.
Mr.
No
Huber,
questions.
Mr. Huber.
Are you an engineer? I have none. I talked to the building inspector, and we went over there, and I don't see any problem with it, really. You want to see mine?
Mr. Schwartz.
I have a few questions for the witness. You say you're familiar with the site, but you don't actually work at the site, correct?
Correct. I did the actual deal. So in real estate, I mean, I've been to the site. I sourced the location when it was vacant. I think it was a sports authority, presented it to ownership here. negotiated the deal in terms of the economics. And so I've been to the site several times.
Have you been to the site since it opened?
I've been to the site since it opened, yes, after grand opening with the executive team to look at the store and meet the management team.
When was the last time you were at the site?
It's probably been a few years.
Few years, more than 2 years?
I can't remember. I don't know how long we've been there, maybe 3 years. So maybe it's been somewhere around 2 years.
And have you reviewed any of the sales numbers for the site in order to determine that this is actually necessary versus it's just a luxury item for Hobby Lobby?
Well, it's becoming from operations. So operations on a daily basis for well over a year. I mean, really, when we went into the store, operations was very concerned that they were going to need additional space than that 42,000 at least to store some stuff. And, you know, a lot of time we're able to work with mezzanine space or to shift things around and create more sales space. But in this store, really from the beginning, it was going to be critical, and the sales have grown each year at a very good increase post-COVID.
Sir, I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, we want to try and keep this moving, but you're not part of the operations team.
I'm not part of the operations team, but I work
You're
with
not
them
management within the store on a day-to-day basis.
Correct.
So either the manager of the store or somebody from operations would have firsthand knowledge, whereas you're getting it second and third hand.
Well, I would say that my firsthand knowledge comes that I ran a store for 11 years and I ran small volume stores. So I know exactly what they're feeling. And I ran a store that it took one truck would not even fit into the back of the back room and dealing with that.
And have you actually personally reviewed the sales numbers for this store for, say, the last 12 months?
Yes.
And when did you do that?
I look at the sales number every day. I look at the net sales numbers weekly, and I can look at them daily. And we just completed our 2020 year-end number review today, actually.
Okay, and based on your review of those numbers, you believe that these are necessary so that you can stockpile Christmas trees in March?
Yes.
And when do those Christmas trees actually hit the floor of the store?
We start setting the Christmas trees usually, they usually have to be up by August 1st.
And what kind of security is going to be present on these containers?
So the containers would be locked, but beyond that, they're insured through our insurance policy.
I didn't ask about insurance. I'm not concerned with whether somebody who gets injured because of these can be paid. I want to keep anyone from getting injured in the first place.
So they're padlocked.
That's all I have for now, Mr. Tiger.
Yes, thanks. I'm wrestling with, the need, but what, Mr. Brendel?
No, I think just the same questions about the need. If it's Christmas trees in March and you're not putting them out till August, could you do a little better job of shipping them sooner, closer to August? But that Andrew didn't say.
Yeah, I mean, we ship to 900 stores when they hit the warehouse here, which is going to be in March, sometime between March and April. And it's not just Christmas trees; it's going to be all the bulk items and stuff. And it's just that store is at its capacity in terms of stock, and has been for quite a while in terms of those bulk items.
Right. Could you start with one container instead of 3?
I think we're already approaching, just with the increase of sales in the last 12 months, we're approaching that one, we would be past that already. And so having 3 is really where we're feeling our current position is.
Okay. And if this doesn't get passed tonight, how will you continue through this year? Like, what are the contingency plans?
Well, we don't have a contingency plan. I mean, operations is going to have to we're going to have to discuss with them what we can do. I don't think there is any contingency plan that would involve reworking inside the store to put those in there. And at this point.
Okay, Mr. Tiger, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Barnett.
Sure. How long have you been in this space?
I think since 2017-ish. About 3 years.
So about 3 years. So when you were sourcing this particular space, you knew it would be undersized and you still chose the space knowing that you would have this issue? So how come you chose this space knowing that it was undersized, and now you're coming to us saying we need more space, so we need a variance from our ordinance?
Well, we have this in lots of locations, and in most cases, we're able to put containers out back. And so our assumption on our locations had been that we would be able to have some sort of additional space in the containers without really an issue. Now, we knew going in at this size, this is likely what we were going to be needing.
Right. So it's your standard operating procedure to get a space that is smaller than your normal space, that's undersized, and then come back to a municipality, ask us to break our ordinance to put temporary storage adjacent to the space that you just chose 3 years ago.
No, I'm saying that we choose locations and markets that we want to be in so that we can serve our customers, and having the ability to have the stock on hand there and put containers out back is a very standard procedure that we've been able to do. We didn't think of it.
So can I ask, so that there is a container behind the building already that I see on some of the exhibits that have been provided to us. What is that container used for? Why is that there? Have you gotten a prior approval or variance from us for that container?
That's one of the reasons we brought the application, was because we were not familiar, or the client was not familiar with the ordinance and had a container there. It was brought to our attention by one of the personnel from the city that we had to get a variance to do that. We brought this application.
How long has that container been there?
I don't know, but
Matt?
Yeah, we filed for the variance fairly quickly after we received the notice.
So as you know, we've had it out there. At some point after we opened, we put it out there, and then when we were notified that it was in violation, then we started the application process.
Okay, so that could have that illegal container could have been there for up to 3 years, you're saying? And you're saying to us, your rationale is ignorance of our ordinance, that container has been placed there for about 3 years?
Well, I'm not saying that the container was there for 3 years. I don't know how long it was there.
What will you? I just heard the witness say shortly after the store was opened. The store was opened in 2017. The witness testified. So it's my assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've had an illegal container outside the building for what could be about 3 years, and now you're saying that you're coming to us because you got caught, and your rationale is ignorance of our ordinance.
See, I wouldn't quite put it that
Counselor,
way.
can the witness answer the question, Counselor, and not you?
Yeah, I don't think I would put it that way. I think that we would say that we've done what we typically do, which is to put containers out back when we need them because of the timing of the year or the size of the store.
And you typically don't check the municipality's ordinances before you put containers outside your buildings.
You know, we talk with the landlord and get approval from the landlord, and the landlord's the owner of the building.
Okay, I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Ms. Ruggiero?
Yes, a few questions. How frequently will they need to access the container? Is this something that's, multiple times a day or once a week?
I don't expect multiple times a day. As we get closer to the season where we're actually selling the trees and the bulk items at a faster rate, we'll be stocking the shelves in the store. So they may go out there in the morning. They may have to pop out there later in the day if they had sold through several trees and bring in a few more so that they can be accessible to take out to the customers' cars in a speedy manner versus having them wait.
Okay, so these are things that, are on the floor, but you just have extra in storage. So they're things that are in the storage are being sold to the customers?
For the Christmas trees, there's just one display. So once they decide they want it, then we just go get them the box of the particular one.
Okay. Who has access to the storage containers?
It will be the store manager has the key to open the door to go outside, and the manager then is with that person who is usually a stock person of some kind that would go and unlock the container and load up on either a pallet jack or a two-wheeler and bring whatever they need in for that time period.
Okay. But typically you say it's basically once a day?
Yeah, during the busy season, but for most, most of the part of the season, we're not accessing really at all.
Okay, so then what's keeping, what, I'm just trying to, again, answer the question of why it's needed, can't having a storage off-site and, once a day, get the storage that they need for the day? Like, why is it necessary to have the storage container there on site if you're not accessing it multiple times throughout the day?
Well, having it close by is, for the time period, I mean, there's certain time periods, yes, we're not accessing it, but to have it off site requires us to then, in some cases, have some sort of truck or way to transport it back, having to wait for that period of time or do that each day, have a stock person go do that. It's very disruptive to our operations to have people off site when they need to be at the stores, bringing those items in there. And we're working in the store.
But should disruption to operation, is that enough to, for us to overrule one of our ordinances? I mean, I'm just trying to understand here, there seems to be other solutions here that are workable. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Loeffler?
Yeah, hi. Mr. Ahmed, when you originally chose that site, were you involved with that?
Yes.
So it sounds to me like you were kind of anticipating that you would, down the road, that you would need to have an additional source of storage, whether it be containers or something else. Am I correct in assuming that?
I think any location that's small, that's a correct assumption that at some point, if the sales are higher, and the store does well, that we might need to move to some sort of container additional storage.
Okay, so my question would be, if you anticipated it back then, why was it not asked for right from the beginning?
We typically don't start out with that, but once it happens and once the sales volume starts to increase, then we put the containers outside.
And have you found that the way of doing that, where you start small and then you ask for more, does that typically work? I mean, is that a common thing for Hobby Lobby?
For the sales volume to increase, yes.
No, for the request for additional storage.
Yeah.
That's a common thing that where you ask for variances at your locations.
Well, honestly, I don't know that we have, I don't know every location there, but this would be the first time I've been involved with a variance of all the locations in terms of getting approval from the landlord and just putting the containers out there and working a location that is away from all the customers and visibility and stuff, to have a seasonal container. I think from just a general retail operation, I think to have a container out back at various times of the year is very common.
Yeah, so what I don't get is why this request wasn't done like at the very beginning, since it is common and it seems to be happening a lot. And I don't know why. That's my area of concern. If you knew this was going to be the case, if it was anticipated, why wasn't it asked right from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak generally for the company other than to say, the position, has always been that, if a store does good, that we would talk with the landlord, we come up with where to put a location of the containers. I mean, I'm certainly, none of us we're taking the position of saying, we want to circumvent the system and just, see if we can sneak a container out there. It was just in all the locations that we've done, that when we were able to put a container out there, when we need a container, we talk with the landlord, we find a location to put it out there, and then we work through that. And if something pops up, then we certainly want to address it in a formal way. But we just typically follow what most of our locations that we have containers have been, that we work something out with the landlord in a location that's not an issue.
Has the landlord been cooperative? I mean, does he agree with you that these containers should be there?
He has been cooperative, and he is in agreement that he seems to be fine that they would be there and out of the way and not be a problem.
Okay, but he hasn't stated any objections at all to you.
No, he knows we were on this. We were preparing this entire year for this hearing.
Okay.
Very aware.
All right, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Loeffler. Mr. Lopes?
Yeah, so I mean, we hit on a lot of good questions. But from a design standpoint, let me just ask, has your internal store design team looked into remodel options before you've come to the board with this container option? Has it been looked at internally if this could be accommodated?
I mean, the only remodel option we've looked at is how to create more sales floor space. And I believe we've probably adjusted a little bit in there already to, our goal is to have everything on the sales floor. So it's available to our customers. And there's just only so much you can do because you've got departments and items and categories that have to be represented. And even in smaller versions of other stores, once you get all of that in there, there just doesn't leave much room for the back room space. And so we've tried to modify as much as we can with that. I just go back to, when we talk about what the need is and how much the need is, I guess I'm just not able to stress enough from being a store manager and knowing that, when the freight is coming to the stores and having a place to put it and having a place to, keep it secure, like some flex space of a storage area, is so valuable. And at the volume that we're doing in this store and at the size of the store, it has become a very problematic situation for that store. And most of it is the Christmas bulk items, but I can't say that, we get a rush of freight at certain times and maybe they put a little bit of other freight in there or whatever. But it is an important flex position for us.
Let me ask you, Hobby Lobby has a prototype design set of documents, I would imagine, that they roll out into every location they want to go into. Is that fair?
Yes, we have a planogram prototype. I mean, they get modified based on the size of the store. So some stuff is taken out and categories are adjusted.
And does that prototype typically have a stock room built into it or a staging area built into it?
They all have stock rooms.
Okay. Do you know how big about that stock room is? How many square feet?
It depends. It's usually based on a percentage. It's usually around, I think, 11 or 12%. I don't know the exact number, but it's based on a percentage of the sales floor of the total square footage.
Okay. And you said that prototype is a 40,000 square foot prototype. Is that what I heard before?
Our prototype is 55,000 square feet. This store is 42,000 square feet.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Wishna?
I'm glad everybody went before me because I think everybody hit on a lot of what I was going to hit on. So I guess the point to Mr. Lopes's questions before had to do with your standard prototype. Prototype was 55,000 feet back when you guys signed the lease? Or has that prototype changed?
It's still 55,000 square feet.
Okay,
for
so
prototype.
you mentioned in, I think, Mr. Barnett's, you responded to one of Mr. Barnett's questions having to do with, timing of when you signed the lease, et cetera. I think you had mentioned that, as Hobby Lobby expanded into the Northeast, finding the box that fit your prototype proved challenging. And I think in several other lines of questioning, you answered that utilizing the storage containers was kind of a standard operating procedure. So I guess my question would be, in the Northeast, how frequently are you rolling out
storage containers to supplement the existing storage in your stores? How many locations do you have this at?
I can't tell you that exact number. I don't know. I can tell you that we have modified our lease over the last few years, that in every lease we put in the right with the landlord up front to be able to have storage containers, because it is becoming more and more of a potential need. And just the way we ship seasonally and the amount of merchandise that comes in at different times when it's not available or can't go out onto the sales floor, that even stores at 55,000, depending if their volume is high, those have containers out as well.
It actually sounds like you need to source larger spaces, not seek containers outside of the spaces that you're leasing. This is not a frequent request in the retail real estate community. You've mentioned a couple times that it is, but I've been in this business for many years, and it isn't a frequent request. It is during renovations, but storing inventory outside of the box that you're leasing is not a frequent request. So I think everybody else has touched on the other questions that I had, so I have no more.
Yeah, before I go, any other board members have any follow-up questions?
I do, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz.
On a slightly different subject, if I heard correctly in the introduction, the access point to these trailers is through there's a door there on the side of the building?
There is a door in the back corner.
Right adjacent to where they're going to be, the trailer to be placed, yes?
On that side, yes.
Did I hear you say that's a fire door?
Well, there's two doors out there. There's a fire door and the other one, but yes.
So the plan is to have your staff access the trailers through a fire door? Yes?
Well, yes, but there's, like I said,
that's enough. The answer was yes. Mike, is that a problem?
Mr. Disco?
You're on mute, Mr. Disco.
So as I understand the question is it a problem if they have access or utilize a fire door, correct?
To access the trailers, yes.
Okay, I don't know if it is in the affirmative. As my understanding of fire doors is to provide additional egress potential in the event of an emergency. So I don't know if the use of that in a non-emergency is a problem. I can't talk to that.
For the witness, do you know, Mr. Witness, is this an alarmed fire door?
It's an alarm door that you unlock, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Tiger, I think we need input from our fire department on this issue.
And I'm gonna take this over. Mr. Cohen, as chair, I don't see this application receiving a favorable resolution tonight. You know, I don't think there's issues with engineering and traffic there, but I think the need is for the use. And now that Mr. Schwartz brings up the concern about a mechanism to deactivate or have that fire door opening and closing, I'm not comfortable going forward tonight. I'm gonna ask that you take the opportunity to work with our board engineer, Mr. Disco, happens to be a really good guy, and the fire chief to see if there's a resolution, a way it works. I personally, and I'll tell you this right now, obviously we still have to hear more witnesses. I don't feel that there's been a need met to be able to put these, but obviously it's up to the entire board. So I'm gonna open it up to the public to see if the public has any questions, and then carry this to our April meeting. Jen, if you can let me know when that April meeting is, because I forget. And hopefully between now and then, we're able to come up with a compromise and solution before we come back together.
And what I'd like, Mr. Tiger, is my understanding, and this may have happened when I was not on the board, but I believe the Hobby Lobby was subject to an application to our board when they moved in.
I don't think so.
This went through without an application process or without a board process?
It was a change of tendency, I believe. I don't think it came before us. Mr. Disco?
If Ms. Law could circulate the application that was filed by the applicant for their original tenancy, I'd be curious to see what they represented in terms of storage space, because I'm a little alarmed that at the nonchalance of Hobby Lobby, that they simply put in a trailer without checking our ordinances, and now they're in front of us with the oops. And I'm not confident that they're not going to come back to us in 2 years and do it again and say they need more than 3. So I'd like to see what they represented in their original application.
Okay.
I would like to also, this is Gary Cohn speaking. If it's going to be carried, I'd like to also be permitted to present an additional witness or 2 witnesses, fact witnesses, and possibly some other additional exhibits. I will say, I don't want to leave here with the wrong impression that whether that fire door can be used or can't be used, that's not the only access to those trailers.
Yeah.
And so there may be other ways that they would access those trailers, because obviously they do stock their warehouse, and that warehouse is stocked through, a different entrance or exit than that fire door. I would also tell you that well, I'll reserve on my comments to the next thing, but I do have some comments here to the board on some of the things they've been saying here.
Yeah, so Mr. Cohen, it would be with no further note, we wouldn't have to renotice.
Chairman Tiger,
yes.
Chairman Tiger, this is Glenn. Let me just respond to Mr. Cohen because he's never appeared in Springfield before. The answer, sir, is of course, you have every right to bring any witnesses that you deem necessary and appropriate in order to provide the information before the board. So the board has sufficient information in order to make an informed decision. That is a non-issue. When was this deemed complete though, Jen?
Well, we deemed it complete last year, and then I want to say it was in end of January. He resubmitted it, and we
All right, so last year doesn't count then. So we can go, if we can get an agreement from Mr. Cohen, if we're going to carry it, Chairman Tiger, I would just like, so it was resubmitted in January. We're now at a March hearing. So Michael, did we do an official completeness letter at some point recently?
Yes, around that time, January.
All right, so I'm gonna take the position that we're probably, if that letter went out, we'll check it, but I don't think we'll need an extension at this time because we have 120 days, as council knows. But I just want to keep track of that.
Glenn, just in case something happens between the April meeting and they need additional time, I'd like a consent to give us through our May meeting. Jen, what is our May meeting? May 6th, 5th?
This is the pandemic exception, Gary. So
yeah, just in case. I mean, it's our intention to have a meeting on April 12th.
May 3rd.
May 3rd. So I'd like a consent that we would extend till May 3rd.
If we need it. If we need it. Is that okay, Mr. Cohen?
Right now, I don't see any. May 3rd is a Monday night, I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
yes, sir. We're a Monday night kind of board.
Okay.
Except for April 12th, that isn't because there's a
holiday. Except for this and that, right, Chairman?
Exactly. So with that, I'm going to carry this application. You can bring whoever witnesses you want, but I think you should really focus when you come back with people from the store that can help present the need from a standpoint. From an engineering and traffic standpoint, from our professionals, and you have every right to put them up, and you should. There doesn't seem like that the issue. The question is, really, do you need these things? For how long do you need them? Can they be a temporary basis? Can it be for a year and then we reevaluate? That type of things. That's what I think we need to get answered. Whether
it might be helpful. I have Corey Chase and I have David Halls, the engineer and the traffic engineer. If there's not going to be, if you don't see this application as them being important to it, then I'm not going to have them come back on May 3rd. However, if at that point on May 3rd,
Well, it could be
there are
April
these-
12th.
April 12th.
Could be April 12th. April 12th would be the next
oh,
meeting.
April 12th will be the meeting. Okay.
Yes, May 3rd is in case you decide on April 12th that you're not
Okay.
ready because
So,
of work.
but I'm not going to listen. I really don't want to waste my clients' money and have them wait and prepare and do all these things. If it becomes an issue where we need their testimony, it seems you're comfortable with pretty much the zoning and the traffic flow types of issues. If that becomes an issue, I just need the right to be able to call them back to testify.
Of course, 100%.
Chairman Tiger?
Yes.
Chairman Tiger, I think we are going to need something, and Mr. Cohen understands this as well as anybody. Who's going to put any planning testimony on since we have 3 variances? We're dealing with the practical realities and the findings of fact and everything, Counselor. But who actually could testify to the variances and the affirmative and negative criteria so that Keenan can say, yeah, I heard you. Keenan being our planner.
You know what? Then I'm going to bring them. I'll bring everybody back.
Well, I'm not. That's your choice, sir. But
I understand.
we are going to need some variance testimony.
Yeah, I understand. Right. We have to meet some threshold. So I'll have to bring them back.
Perfect. Okay, at this time, I'm going to take the opportunity to open this matter up to the public. Anyone of the public wishes to speak on application for Hobby Lobby?
Chairman Tiger, if you're going to do that, my suggestion is that I don't know that you want public comments as much as you'd only want some questions of the witness. Don't swear anybody in, but the board was very, very thorough, I thought, in questioning the issues. So if the public has something to add, that's fine.
Apu, is there anyone from the public?
I only see one person, but nothing in the Q&A or no hand raised.
Perfect. Okay, so Mr. Cohen, at this point, I'm going to take this opportunity to defer this application to our April 12th meeting, 6 p.m. There will be no further notice required from Hobby Lobby, so you don't have to redo that again. You can bring whatever witnesses you want to the meeting, and you will be first on the agenda for April 12th at 6 p.m., other than meeting minutes and so forth that we normally have. Okay? During this time, please get in touch with Mr. Disco, the fire marshal, to be able to see where the doors placement, access, because that's the things that we're going to need some information on. All right. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you, Matthew, and the rest of the witnesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
for
At this
signing
point, any other members of the public wish to speak on any business before this board, whether it be our ordinances or the application? Apu, anyone?
Seeing none.
Okay, so at that point, I'm going to close the meeting to the public and then ask the board, Mr. Schwartz wants to make a motion to approve.
To adjourn?
Adjourn, yes, adjourn.
Approve? I don't know what I'm approving, but I will move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
I approve.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
remember, one on the board, our next meeting is next Monday at 5:30 p.m., a special meeting for a redevelopment.
I won't be there. I'll
Oh.
be there. I've been trying to be there at 6, but I can't. I'll be driving home at that time.
Okay, it's fine, Mr. Huber. You get to, the governing body have already reviewed it, so they'll be able to see it as well. So you get an opportunity when it goes to the governing body.
Yeah, if I get home early, I'll be there, but I doubt it.
Okay.
All right, Rich.
Thank you, everyone.
Sitting at home. It's nice to sit at home, isn't it?
It's great. I love it.
Yeah.